Grizzlies at Spurs, Sunday NBA playoff, game 1, round 1. Who do you like?
VR's going square here. I love the over. I really do. I usually, I'm an under better. I look to bet the under first because I think that's the bias of the betting public, the bias of the marketplace usually gives me a little more value on the under.
Agree.
But in this case, I'm going square, and I love the over.
All right, so now we just talked about in the last video is the idea when you go square, as you're saying, is you have to the circumstances of the game have to overcome a little bit more than if you were playing under. So let's just say for the sake of, what number are you saying?
I'm 195.5.
All right, so the case might be made that let's say the line's inflated by a half a point even. All right, just because the natural bias towards the over. You're having to overcome an extra half a point to get over that total. Now your game reasoning is going to have to be strong enough to overcome that extra half a point. So what's your game reasoning?
Bottom line, before I even get to that, I don't think that the perception is going to make this undervalued. Because of the fact, like I said, we're getting a saturated marketplace of unsavvy bettors, guys that may not have bet all year. And when they enter the playoffs, and you think San Antonio Spurs, you think defense. When you think Memphis Grizzlies, you think low scoring. So I think this is one of those games where the odds makers got it wrong, thinking that, which way the public's going to go with this. I think the public's going to go under, believe it or not. I think they're going to lean towards the under, thinking San Antonio is a defensive team and Memphis don't score a lot.
So you're saying that typically overs there's a bias for, but if you get two known defensive teams, that all of a sudden the lines maker is going to skew it so the value is on the over.
Exactly.
Because they expect under action.
Exactly. Like in football, Steelers, Baltimore Ravens. You can't
33 or whatever.
You can't tell me that it's skewed towards the bias of betting the over anymore.
But if you look at the Steelers at home specifically, like for 5 years, they're, unless I'm doing this from memory, they're over like 64%.
Exactly, because the bias is defense, 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 and I think the market overcompensates. And that's what they've done here with this 195.5. These teams have met 4 times all year. 1 time has it gone under the number, okay? And that was simply because Memphis shot 38% from the field. That's the only reason. Where every other time they met San Antonio, they shot 44% or better, eclipsed 50% or better 2 of the 4 times. So they've had no problem generating offense against the Spurs.
All right, so you bring up a good point. Is once you get to the playoffs, until the finals, this is all interconference, so they've played each other more than a few times. In your playoff handicapping, how do you account for the prior season meetings?
I try to look at the situation of the game, meaning what happened to lead to that final for that game. Were there any circumstances leading up? Did the team play 3 times in 4 nights?
So if there's deceiving results, since almost any capsule of the playoff matchups will have the prior results listed, if by glancing at them, a square bettor says, wow, this game's going over because it went over 4 out of 5, you're saying you dig in, and if in a couple of those games there was reasons that it went over that maybe aren't going to repeat themselves, you see value there.
Exactly. And in this case...
But in this case, it seems like the opposite. You're saying you're literally seeing something that reinforces it wasn't deceiving. It went over, and you think it reinforces the fact that these teams are going to play over.
Correct. And the odds makers have not adjusted because of that public bias of the Spurs and Memphis being low-scoring teams. Because the last time they played, the total was 197. The game before that, 197.5. So now it's down to 195.5. That 2 points lower than it was the last 2 times they met these teams. More importantly, when you look at these teams this year, they're offensive. They are not good defensively. Bottom line, Spurs are 14th in points allowed, 12th in field goal percentage allowed, 22nd in three-point percentage allowed. On the flip side, Memphis, 13th in points allowed, 14th in field goal percentage allowed, 14th in three-point field goals allowed.
So you're saying this defensive reputation is maybe not fully warranted?
At all. And more importantly, look at the Spurs this year. The bias of them being a low-scoring team has allowed them to go over in 44 of their 82 games. 2 of them were pushes. 44 of the 80 have gone over the total because of that fact. And I think that's what we're going to get here. This first game, we're going to see plenty of offense. Like I said, 3 of the 4 meetings went over the total, eclipsed 200 points in 3 of the 4. And I think we're going to get that exact same result in game 1.
Okay, so it's interesting. Let's go back, 2 interesting points. One, 44 out of 80. Someone says, well, 40 out of 80 is break even. Well, you're making the point that if you're looking at every game, it's skewed a little bit towards the fact their line's a little lower, so
exactly.
a few more games are falling. So the starting point here is there's probably a bias towards San Antonio going under, which makes you want to look over. I also find it interesting, and this is my question for you, is when you say, all right, we look at the season series from these teams, from any playoff teams, and you say there's 2 possibilities. One is the results are indicative of something, or 2, there's a misperception based on the results, and you're going to fade the misperception, you're going to back when it's indicative. But if it's indicative, if it's true, and it backs up what the public thinks, all right, so if the public thinks the Lakers are great. If the Lakers swept their first-round opponent 5-0 during the season, it's going to back up and it's going to reinforce what the public already thinks. So though the season series might tell you something, it's going to put you on the same side as the public, which means there's probably not going to be
value at all, exactly.
But if it reinforces, or if it is indicative, in this case, of something the public doesn't think, you can use the proof of the season series against the public,
exactly.
and to reinforce your feelings.
Exactly, and that's exactly what I'm doing in this case. And breaking down all 4 meetings, except for the one time where Memphis wasn't able to break 40% from the field, every game went over. And both teams have been able to shoot about 50% from the field against each other. They just match up well to score points. They don't play defense against each other. And the truth of the matter is, they're not defensive teams anymore. Spurs are not a defensive-minded team. Anyone that thinks they're going to get to the championship because they play lockdown defense, you're a couple years behind. That's not this year's Spurs team. And I think it's going to take a little while before the market catches up with that, especially in the playoffs.
All right, give us your official projection.
I think we're looking at 105, 101, 105, 100. I think this game goes over that 200 mark. It's sitting at 195.5, so for me, that's enough value.
All right. Well, I got to tell you, I'm going to endorse this one. Coming in, I don't like going over, but you've convinced me, and really that's the whole point of this, is you making out your case and me telling you when you're right.
Yeah, and tell me when I'm wrong.
All right, it's your turn to continue the conversation in the comment section with VR and me. And next up, we're going to be breaking down a Saturday NBA game. Which game is it?
That I love, Orlando, Atlanta. I love this next game. This is best bet possibilities.
Don't miss out.